If you like what you hear, please take time to review us on Apple Podcasts and make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. Also, if you'd like to be on the podcast, let us know, or if you have someone you would like us to feature, let us know that as well. Welcome to another episode of the Business Lifestyle Podcast. I'm Sandra King.
Casey Lyons.
And today we have Chris Hart with Great Divide Property Inspections. Thanks for coming.
My pleasure.
Cool. So we usually talk about like what we did for the weekend and stuff like that. So you did anything exciting or crazy or?
Squirt hockey.
Oh, nice. Right on.
Yeah. My youngest son plays hockey, so we're,
traveling.
This week was local, Vail.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yep. So that was good. Went and had some hockey fun.
Nice. That's awesome. How'd they do?
They won 1 out of 3.
Well, that's better than 0 out of 3.
Vail's pretty tough. They've got a substantially larger pool to draw from.
Yeah.
Our kids, we got 1 line each.
Yeah, exactly.
So they usually they'll get up, take a lead, and then usually by halfway through the third period they're just gassed.
Oh.
And they kind of tired out.
Yeah, for sure. And what age group is that?
This is 10 and under.
10 and under. Oh, so cute. Right on. Well, Casey, I know what you did this weekend.
Yeah, we had our company Christmas party.
Yeah.
So it was exciting.
It was fun.
It was a good time.
We rented a house down by Basalt, basically, and everybody came and could stay. So like all our staff and spouses.
Oh, fun.
And then we were able to bring dogs because I'm kind of a freak about my dog. And last year I had to leave my dog at home. So,
good.
My miniature schnauzer. So I brought him. And so we had a good time. We just, we did some team building stuff. And my son's a really good amateur chef. So he does the menu. He did like a 5-course menu and stuff. So yeah, it was fun. And then did our little gift exchange and stuff. And just a nice break before it starts like total hectic with families and everything. So,
right.
Yeah. So how did you end up in Steamboat?
Well, I'm a mathematician by education.
No kidding.
And I grew up in New England and moved out to Denver right after college and started a career as a software engineer.
Oh, wow.
And it was through all that pre-Y2K stuff. And, my wife and I basically, I was in between contracts and I just knew I couldn't do it.
And the world didn't end.
The world didn't end. Yeah. But I knew I just couldn't do that job for the rest of my life, and kind of got burned out through that, the hours and everything through that. Build up to the Y2K. So my wife she grew up like skiing in Steamboat, like on family vacations from Minnesota.
Oh, really?
And we just kind of talked about what we wanted to do, and we both decided that we wanted to live in a resort town, and so so we made the move, and then of course small town living and lack of corporations and stuff like that. We both decided to retool ourselves and tie ourselves to the real estate industry. And, that was 16 years ago now.
Wow.
That's crazy.
So, now we've got 2 boys and, it's a great place to raise a family. And
it is. The Valley's really good.
It's been a really good decision.
Yeah, for sure. And so what made you decide that home inspections was the way?
Well,
it's like a run.
Yeah, I kind of, it took a little soul searching. We looked at some other business opportunities and, thought about it. But eventually when we settled in on Steamboat, I don't know. I just kind of, I had a guy that I knew that did it in Evergreen on the Front Range. And so I spent some time with him over the course of a summer and did some ride-alongs and just kind of learned a little bit about it. And then, of course, went and got my formal training out. Back then, there was only a few places in the country that you could.
Right.
I had to go to Southern California for a few
Oh.
weeks to go through that training process. So I think just riding along with him and finding out a little bit about the job, and the biggest thing I think was the self-employment was something that I knew when I made that switch. Self-employment was
Yeah.
the number one goal,
Absolutely.
and then we went from there.
That's the nice thing about being self-employed is that you can do what you want for the most part. If you need to go with your kids or whatever, you
Right,
can.
right. I
We've
mean,
got so much more flexibility.
right. On the flip side, you're a slave
That's true.
Exactly.
to your phone
Oh,
and
yeah.
and to everything. So there's
Yeah.
pros and cons.
There
but,
is. I think the pros outweigh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But all in all, it's been a great decision. And
Yeah.
you know,
Well, we sure
happy with the
appreciate you.
choice.
Yes, for sure. And the thing that I always say when I tell people this is who I recommend is I like that you're common sense instead of, oh my God, this is a major problem, oh, and freak the buyer out. You're good with common sense to just
Here's
say,
the
look,
problem.
yep,
Here's a solution.
exactly. And I appreciate that because a lot of the home inspectors are like, I'm a kind of a handyman carpenter. I'll just be a home inspector. And you're like, whoa.
Right. Well, and I think I mean, and of course, a lot like real estate, right? I mean, so both my wife and I came from, corporate environments, Fortune 500 companies. Like, there's a professionalism that goes along with
Right.
working in those types of jobs.
That's right.
And sometimes, real estate, home inspections, I mean, you can get a wide gamut of people that come into the business and from people with all different kinds of backgrounds. And I think that, sometimes that professional background helps me out
Right.
with this. And, and then you also have experience levels. And just like with real estate, right? When you go through your education and everything, everybody's scared of being sued out of business and the whole CYA. And so when you end up with inspectors that I think are a little bit less experienced and, and it's not a knock on them, it's just that they need to get over that hump.
Right.
Right. I mean, for me now, I've been through, over 7,500 homes. I mean, that's a lot of homes. Like I don't see much anymore that I haven't seen
Already
before.
seen.
Right.
And so with less experienced inspectors, they might make bigger issues out of things that are smaller because they may not know,
Right,
they may not
exactly.
be sure of what it is.
Exactly.
And then I think the other aspect of it is with the common sense approach is just the fact that, especially when you're dealing with older homes, right? I mean, the older homes are, you can't hold them accountable to modern building standards.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
And you can't go in there and say, oh, well, so all of this needs to be updated because this isn't how they would do it today. Well, I mean, it's just not practical.
Right.
And, the building codes change over time. But you have to be able to look at that older house and recognize that type of construction. And as long as it's not deficient and that it's performing as designed, then you don't need to go in there and try to, re-engineer what's going on with the property.
Right, exactly. Well, and Federal Pacific Electric boxes are a big thing, which I kind of always have to laugh at this because my dad, before we moved here in 1978, my dad was a draftsman for Federal Pacific Electric, and he never cared for the company back then. So now that I see these boxes and I just kind of laugh because, of course, they've lost their UL rating, I think, in 1978.
Yeah.
But it's not a, oh my God, which some people do.
No, I mean, it's right. I mean,
Watch it.
generally it's $1,500 if you're going to replace the panel.
Right.
I mean, when it comes down to it, it is construction. It's not rocket science.
Right.
Right. Things
Right.
can be repaired. Things can be replaced.
Exactly. It's
I
not
mean,
a
of
deal
course,
killer.
there's a
Yeah.
dollar amount associated with that, and that's where you guys come in and help people through that portion of the transaction. But certainly, yes, Federal Pacific panels. There's also another company called Zinsco. That is, I see a lot of them more in high density condo complexes.
Okay.
And then there's also these old ones called Bulldog Pushmatics, which
I've seen a Pushmatic.
I think I've only
Can't remember
seen
which.
maybe
Yeah.
2 or 3 of them. They don't seem like they were used a lot.
Uh-huh.
But and then of course other materials, right? I mean, things get recalled, class
Right.
action lawsuits
Just like
happen.
vehicles.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
It's no different.
And so there's like some radiant tubing,
Right, that
that
polybutylene pipe. Yeah.
there's the polybutylene. There's certain PEX manufacturers that have been recalled and stuff. And so those are the types of things that we want to make sure we identify for people when we're in a house, to let them know, hey, okay, you actually do have a material that has a documented history of failure.
Right.
Okay, so let's go from there. Not try to be so worried about minor cosmetic stuff, right? Try to focus on the larger systems, the infrastructure.
Right. Well, and we think that home inspections are so important, our office, Casey and I, because it's the chance for the buyer to see what they maybe want to deal with, what they don't want to deal with, and be able to go back to the seller and say, okay, I really do want these things fixed or corrected.
And
or,
just to have it for themselves, for if this is only a 5-year plan for a house, like, okay, these are the things that I can go
Right.
through my list. I
Right.
got it. They
Right.
fix 2, I'll take care of the rest. You know?
Right.
So I mean, I usually tell my clients that, my job is to just try to give them the best picture that I can of the condition of the investment,
Right.
just so that they're going through the transaction with their eyes open.
Right.
Yep.
And
Right.
then, it's real estate. Everything's negotiable,
Right.
after that.
Yep.
So, and like you said, maybe, they've got a good deal on price. They've got some room in their budget, and they know, okay, fine. Versus, this is an unforeseen issue, or something that maybe, we weren't really planning on having to put that kind of money into the house. But again, everything's got a life expectancy.
Right.
Everything can be fixed.
Right.
So we just want people to go through the transaction, ideally without any significant surprises
Right.
after they close.
Right. And are you seeing anything that seems to be more of a concern now that it wasn't before? Like when you and I first met 16 years ago, radon wasn't a big thing here. Nobody really knew about it. Nobody cared to know what the test was. None of that. Now it seems last several years it's sort of picked up speed. And,
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is so radon is, just an inert gas that comes up through the Earth's crust. Your house is either built on it or it's not, right? You can test 3 houses in a row, and 2 won't and 1 will, and foundation type's irrelevant. I get that question a lot. Well, it's on a slab, so it doesn't have radon.
no.
Incorrect.
Yes, you
Like-
and I had one way back in the day that was on a slab.
It
yeah.
doesn't matter, right? So, the radon, I think because of the public awareness that the governor, I think it was Ritter, that he really spent time, effort, and money from a state standpoint of getting that out there. And then, of course, you guys hear about it all the time in your continuing education.
Right.
And so the word has kind of gotten out. So more and more people do test for it. I would say when I first got started, I mean, condos are still kind of unusual for people to test, but certainly single family and townhomes, it was probably maybe 15 to 20% of buyers. And now I'd say it's completely flipped, and it's more like probably 75% of buyers. And, I mean, I usually give people the information off the EPA website and stuff like that. It's, there's a link to lung cancer.
But isn't it like a huge, I mean, it's like 1 in 250 million people with.
Well, and this is where you just kind of have to let the clients make their own decisions. So
Right.
I think statistically it's like 22 or 24,000 people a year die from it. So
With an exposure to high levels over a 24-hour
so your
period.
odds
yes.
are probably just as good as getting hit by a bus.
Right.
But then you have families that have a history of lung cancer, and they're
Right.
non-smokers.
Right.
And, so it's one of those things that, it is a, potential health issue. And of course, so the EPA has their line in the sand. And so they set it at 4 picocuries per liter. Okay. And so they recommend anything above that be mitigated.
Right.
So sometimes people come back and their levels at 5 and they're like, holy cow, I'm a whole, 20% over. And it's a little misleading. It's not a linear scale, right? So, I mean, I test houses that are like 50, 60,
Right.
80.
Right.
I've tested some that have been in the hundreds.
Wow.
So you really want to make sure it's worth testing because you want to make sure that you don't have an outlier. Like you don't, if your house is at 5 and you want to mitigate, fine. It's a couple $1,000, your
Sure.
problem goes away. It's easy. Contractors in and out in one day, it's over. But yeah, I mean, if you have a house that's 50 or 60, I mean, you'd want to know about it.
Oh, absolutely.
Because then those levels get to the point that, yeah, I mean, if you live there for a decade or two,
Right.
Maybe you're gonna see something.
right, you could be
Right.
negatively impacting your health relatively significantly.
And have we seen the really high numbers here in Moffat County? I don't think I have personally, but
I don't know. I think, certainly the decomposing granite that we have over in Route County can lead to higher levels.
oh, that's
Up
why
on
yours are higher.
Buffalo
Okay.
Pass, places, up in the mountains where the homes are built on that type of geology.
So it doesn't have anything to do with the uranium or anything like that.
Not that I'm I'm
Okay.
aware of. I do notice that the levels out in Craig seem to be statistically higher from a percentage standpoint than maybe someplace like Hayden, which
Okay.
kind of surprised me because you guys, there's a lot of clay here.
Oh
and
yeah.
Yeah.
stuff like that. So I don't see the really high levels here, but I think consistently I see a lot of like 6 or 8 or 12. So levels that are high enough to probably warrant mitigation. I mean, like I said, for your health, I mean,
Oh yeah.
$2,000 and it goes
that's
away and it's
something
done.
someone could do before even listing their house.
Oh,
Correct?
yeah.
Oh, that's a good idea. I never even
Take
thought
care of
that.
it. Done.
Yeah. Get it tested and then they know.
Yep. And a fair number of people do that, and I think it just comes down to the realtors too on whether or not they tell their clients, hey,
Yeah.
a lot of buyers are going to test for this anyway.
Just
You
have it
might,
done.
right, and it's an
Yeah.
easy do-it-yourself process. You don't need to pay me or any of the other inspectors to do it. People will pay me because of the time crunch
Right.
of a real estate transaction. Because I've got what they call a continuous monitor. I've got a couple of them. They're $1,500 pieces of equipment, and we get our results quickly.
Right.
Or if we use the passive devices, I can still get the results within 3 or 4 days.
Right. Right. In Junction, they use the electronic things quite often.
Right, right.
I'll have deals where they just like leave it on the dining room table on the slab house.
Exactly,
and stuff. Yeah.
exactly. So if you do it yourself, it's usually more of like maybe a 2-week, process or something like that. But you can buy the kits online, or
Sure.
at Rock County they sell them at the county building. And people can just follow the instructions and do it themselves. So even if they're not gonna be part of a real estate sale, it's worth testing. I
Yeah,
mean, for
absolutely.
the few bucks that the test costs.
Right. Right. That's a good idea.
We'd like to give a big shout out to E&L Signs for being our sponsor of this podcast. E&L Signs serves Western Colorado and Eastern Utah for all your screen printing and vehicle lettering needs. With over 30 years experience, Ed Moore will get it done for you. So remember, E&L Signs.
So then, besides radon, what else is kind of a big, scary, or not really scary, but
Yeah,
something that people need to be thinking about?
Well, I mean, for me, right? I mean, the big items are always the structural. I mean, for what I'm looking at to make sure that my buyer is aware of, are things, structural deficiencies, moisture related problems, right? Moisture is the first thing that destroys a house, right?
Right.
And that can be external moisture, roof leaks, poor drainage, etc. It could be internal, plumbing, stuff like that. And of course, then because when you have moisture, you end up with structural issues. You end up with rot and decay, and then you end up
Do we
with
have mold? We do have mold here.
And almost every house has got some. So it's not
Okay.
like the big 4-letter word. I mean, you don't have to run away from it.
Right.
Usually I always tell people, because I get this a lot where people are like, oh my goodness, mold. Oh my
Right.
god, right? And it's like the mold is just a byproduct of the fact that you have a water problem.
Gotcha.
The water
That's
problem.
the more
That's
serious
insane.
problem.
Right. The
Yeah.
mold you can clean. You
Yeah.
can just cut the driveway. Right. The mold you can
Yeah.
get rid of.
Yeah.
You got a water problem, which
That's serious.
is
Yeah.
probably a bigger issue.
Yeah.
So I'm always concerned with the moisture and the structural stuff, and then of course safety type items, which are usually easy to fix, but
Right.
they're safety. So
Let's
I
talk
want to make
about
sure
it.
people
Yeah.
are aware of them. But I don't really find anything to be too scary, because I tell people, the big items are usually the easy ones to get resolved, because if you have a foundation issue, the cellar, I mean,
Right.
everybody agrees that there's a significant deficiency with the house, and that it needs to be looked at by an engineer, or that it's going to need to be repaired. And the seller knows that if they don't work with that particular buyer,
They're going to have
more
to on
often
the
than
next
they're
one.
good, right?
Yeah.
They're going to have, it's not going away.
That's right.
And so those issues, I think, are usually, yes, maybe they're a little bit more high dollar or stuff like that. But I think, from a psychological standpoint, it's easier to work through
Right.
those ones.
Right. Well, and there's options now with foundation problems and the injection and stuff like
Right.
that.
Oh,
That
yeah.
Right.
it's amazing.
Right. Just
Yeah.
like any other field, construction has changed a lot over the last 20 years. And they've got new tools at their disposal and new techniques and stuff like that. So again, it's construction. It's not
Right.
rocket science.
Right.
Everything can be fixed.
That's right.
And, so the goal is to be able to just help them through that process again, so that they've
Right.
got their eyes open and that they understand what they're going through. And then, once people have the information, they can make a decision.
Right. Exactly. If they can live with it or not live with it.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're staying pretty busy with lots of inspections that we were talking about earlier.
Yep. I mean, I think there's probably 10 or 12 inspectors probably between the two, between Moffett and Routt County.
And does everybody have the same training? You mentioned you had.
Well, and this is, it's kind of like, it's kind of like being a realtor, right? When you first get started, it's a few $1,000 and
Here we go.
and
But
here you
continuing
go.
education and things
Yeah,
like that.
so
Yeah.
so the bottom line is, the short answer is, the state of Colorado does not require state licensing for home inspectors like they would like a GC. Okay, some states do: Texas, California, Florida.
Why, I wonder, does Colorado
I
not?
know. I would,
So most states don't. It's only
Oh.
about 3 or 4 states that
That do. Oh,
but
okay.
the Colorado legislator, they have looked at this, and every year or every other year, it kind of comes up for a vote, and they kind of shoot it down which is, I mean, I would prefer that they do it, in all honesty, but what they've come back and said is, well, the industry has done a reasonable job of policing itself, so we don't feel like we need to get involved. So the good news is that I think inspectors that are in business, that have a healthy business, that have been in business for a while, that have that experience, we're doing our job, in a professional manner that's meeting people's expectations, and we're not getting sued. We don't have,
Right.
we're not missing things that would then cause, and that's one of the things that the legislator look at, right? Oh, there's a bunch of lawsuits going on in this industry. The guys that are out there doing it in the field, they don't know what they're doing.
Right.
We need to step in.
Okay.
So the good news is that we're doing a good job.
Right.
But I think, having some of that oversight would not be bad. So in lieu of that, there's a couple of things that you can look for when you're hiring an inspector. One is they should be a member of either ASHI, which is the American Society of Home Inspectors, or NASHI, the North American Certified Home Inspector. Those organizations, to become a member, you have to have passed online exams.
Okay.
You have to have demonstrated over 500 paid inspections or something like that. I think they require me to do about 34 hours a year of continuing education. They force me to, carry an above 80% grade on those exams, et cetera, et cetera. And then of course the other thing would be insurance, right? So the state, of course, as with any business, right, the state requires that you carry general liability,
Right.
but you want to make sure that your inspector carries errors and omissions insurance as well. The guys that don't have a great business can't afford it because it's
Okay.
fairly expensive.
Okay.
So if your home inspector is carrying E&O insurance, I think I carry about $1 million worth, then that tells you something about
The
What?
the
integrity.
level of their business and how mature their business is, because of the fact that they know that they need to spend the
Right.
money on that.
Right. I didn't even think about the E&O. Yeah.
What about, like, I know when you do a report, it'll say per code. Is that something yearly you have to do? Is that sent to you or
No, that's all in my brain.
brain? Yeah, I didn't know if that changes
You
a lot.
know,
Like, is that stuff you gotta look up?
It sometimes, yeah. So, you can be, just like anybody else, in their professional career. Maybe I'm a little bit of a nerd. Like I'll read the IRC code books.
That's a good sign.
No, I would not.
So there's a little bit of a misconception. So first off, right, a home inspection is not a code compliance inspection.
Right.
Okay, I mean, the county. Okay, so the home is held accountable to the code at time of construction.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
and the county comes out and they inspect that during the phases of the construction. So they sign off, right? Okay, we're going to dig a hole. Okay. Then the county looks at it. Okay, excavated correctly, everything done. Okay, fine. Okay, we're going to pour the foundation. Then they come out, they inspect that, right? Is that all up to code? Do they have their anchors every 6 feet? Okay, fine. Now we're going to let you guys frame,
Yeah.
right? Then they inspect the framing. Then they inspect the rough. As a home inspector, we don't have that luxury, right? We're looking at a finished product.
Right.
We're
Yeah.
looking at drywall, flooring material. I have no idea what's inside the walls.
Right.
Right. I
Right.
have no X-ray vision. I, don't know what the plumbing looks like in there, the electrical. What you're hoping for is that if there's a significant defect, that it shows itself, right?
Right.
Oh, the plumbing gurgles. Okay, so it's not vented properly or something along those lines. But anyway, so sometimes people, well, we want to make sure everything's up to code. Well, okay, if you're buying a house in the 60s or the 70s, that code's completely different.
Yeah.
Now, with that said, where the code has changed for the sake of safety or things like that, then we want to document
Note
that
it.
stuff and we
Okay.
want to note that out. Like a simple example would just be like GFCIs, right? Okay, so you have a house that you live in a house from the 60s. It has no grounding conductor.
Yeah.
While you're washing out your coffee mug and plugging in your coffee maker, you don't want to kill yourself
Oh,
through
okay.
electrocution.
Yeah. That's
so,
a drawback.
a $15 GFCI outlet, installed by the sink is a very easy, simple way to really give you good bang for your buck in terms of increasing your safety, and But again, you don't have to. Insulation would be another thing, right?
I can't believe how many homes has insulation installed the wrong way. And like
Oh,
attics
yeah,
and underneath, like it blows my mind.
Well, and so part of that is right. So a lot of that is the do-it-yourself person because so the insulation it comes in two different styles, right? It comes with they either call it faced or unfaced. So if you think about just fiberglass bat, everybody can kind of know what that looks like, right? It'll some if you buy it faced, it'll have either foil or paper on it, right? And what that is there for is to create what they call a vapor barrier. Well, so if you install it, say, in a crawl space, the paper, the vapor barrier, is supposed to go touch the warm side, right? So it should be under the floor. So if you're in the crawl space looking at the insulation, you should not be looking at paper.
I know. That's
But
crazy.
when people install it, right, fiberglass is nasty. Right, and they don't have,
and then they staple the paper to the
so they
end,
don't
yeah.
want to touch the fiberglass, so it's easier to unroll it and push the paper up and then staple the paper. And so that's just people not realizing because the side effect of that is now your vapor barrier is at the bottom of your joist bay, right? And so now if you have a humid environment, right, or you end up with some condensation, now the condensation and the moisture is trapped between the barrier and your flooring system. So in an extreme case, and our climate's pretty dry and more
Right.
often than not, that installation defect does not create a real significant problem. But in some cases, you'll just rot out your flooring system and grow a bunch of mold in your floor bay because of the fact that it's installed incorrectly.
Yeah, that's crazy. Well, and like going back to the electrician thing, I had one inspector that I had the cellars, and he put in there that per code the electric blah 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 12 gauge. I can't even remember the exact scenario now, but it was something on how the wire stepped down to a different size wire, which was against code and all this jazz. And so I send the electrician Marty Berman over there, and he's like, this is code. And he was furious because he had to go over there for something that was not, it shouldn't have even been addressed. So he writes out in detail on the bill, and he's like, I want you to send that to the buyer's agent. I want them to know that inspector does not understand code, even though he said he did.
Well, and so that's a tricky part, right, of quoting code, right? Because let's face it, I'm not an expert like the county guys are, right? I mean,
Right.
I'm like your expert generalist, if you will, right? So I mean, I've got to know electrical, plumbing, carpentry, roofing, right? Whereas the county, they've got an electrical inspector,
Right.
they've
roofer.
got their plumbing inspector. So and to go back what you were saying before, right? The code rolls every we usually switch it every 3 or 4 years. We kind of roll up to the next code, and the county does offer classes that I go
that's
to
nice.
to talk about the deltas, the differences, or things that they've added or taken
Okay.
away.
Is that open to anyone?
Yeah,
That
yeah.
might be something.
That's a good idea.
And and usually it's 2 or 3 days, 8 to 5. You can kind of pick and choose your
Right.
topics, kind of a
Right.
thing. But yeah, so quoting code is usually not very good unless you're
100%
you're
certain.
right.
Yeah.
You're looking at
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
And everybody's human. Everybody
Oh, yeah.
makes mistakes and stuff like that. I mean, I did a new construction over right at the base of the ski area over at the Wild Horse development, and the contractor was actually a little upset that I was even there because he was like, well, the county's coming out to give me my CO. So I don't know why you're here. Because I was like, well, I'm here because the buyer wants me here.
Right.
And sure enough, there was they didn't vent the ejector tank correctly, the lift station. And I saw it, and I told the guy, he was like, well, it doesn't matter because the county's coming out to give you my CO. And I was like, well,
yeah,
I don't, I was like, I don't
Yeah.
think they're gonna. And so I actually called the building department and was like, you guys know you have a mechanical valve of what they call an AAV valve on that lift station. And I'm looking at the 2016 code, and it says right there that that's not allowed. I dug through the book, and the guy was like, yeah, you're right. We missed it. So, so sometimes people, when they're buying new houses, they say, oh, well, is an inspection really worth it? It's new. I'm going to have a warranty from the builder for a year anyway. I usually more eyes are always better.
Oh, absolutely.
Because the county guys may miss stuff. I may miss stuff. But having multiple people go through and look at it, can kind of, lend a little, make people feel good about their purchase, especially.
Exactly. Because it is the biggest purchase they're ever going to make,
Right. So, so the code, I think back to what you were saying is the worst thing that I can do is waste people's time and money by going down paths. If you're not sure, then either make yourself sure, right? Or, don't assume that maybe that the professionals that, did what they were supposed to do.
Right.
And I've been fortunate enough, like I have a good friend of mine who's a journeyman electrician. When I first got started, electrical is probably one of the more difficult things for home inspectors.
Right.
I would just take a picture of it and shoot him a text, and say, hey, what am I looking at here? And sometimes he would be like, yeah, you know what? It's not the way I would do it, but it's not wrong.
It's not wrong, yeah.
So it's a little bit different than what you're used to seeing, but it doesn't mean it's incorrect. So, I think, inspectors have to be problem solvers. And just like anything else, some people are, they have more of an aptitude towards how far they're willing to pursue stuff.
Right.
And so I try very hard to have good working relationships with the county inspectors,
right,
with other friends and acquaintances of mine that are in the industry, to try to make sure that if I don't know the answer, I want to get it, and I want to get it from a reputable source, before I just write something up because it just doesn't look right.
That's what I appreciate about you too, is if I have a question on anything, even if it's before they're going to list you, we need to fix this, I can call you up and be like, hey, is this going to be a situation? What do you feel about this? I appreciate that a lot. You're probably, when you look at your phone, you're like, oh my God.
No,
It's Casey again.
not at all. And and what it tells me is that it really makes me feel good, because I mean, let's face it, like I work in a vacuum, right? I mean, I'm in people's houses by myself all day, every day.
Yep.
Vacant houses, or very rarely do I have clients with me.
right.
So I totally work in a vacuum, and so I don't always get a lot of feedback. But the feedback I do get usually comes in the form of realtors, calling me. What makes me feel great is realtors call me when they're buying their own houses.
Nice.
Yeah.
Right. And so they don't call one of the other guys, they call me. And, that makes me feel good about that. And then also realtors, and this puts me in a little bit of a precarious situation sometimes, but they will call to discuss other people's reports and be like, hey, this guy's asking for X, based on this inspector's
I think
report.
I've done that to you.
Is this guy in left field or what? And so certainly I'm not there to to discredit any of the other inspectors. Matter of fact, a couple of them, I talk with, once a quarter. One or two of them I'll go out and have a cup of coffee with.
And you've told us if
Because-
I can't get you, go to these guys.
Well, and I
Yeah.
just feel like, we're all servicing the same clients. Like as an industry, we need
Let's be a
to,
team.
right. We need to, I mean, just like you guys, right? I mean, you're competitors, but you're also servicing the needs of the same people.
That's right.
And we're all trying to help people through
I'm
a
just saying, Eric
transaction.
did bring us donuts. Just throwing
Well,
that.
there you go.
I'm just throwing that out there.
Should have done that this
Yeah, you
morning.
came from Steamboat today. Oh, man.
Okay. I had my son at the rink at 6:30 this morning. I was a little.
You were thinking, oh yeah, which is what, conveniently right by Powder Day Donuts.
I suppose so. Duly noted. Duly noted, ladies.
No, that's
But yeah, I mean, we're all servicing the same,
That's right.
the same
Yeah.
industry, and
we
you
all have the
want
end goal.
you want people to have a positive
Mm-hmm.
experience through their transaction, and feel like they're getting a level of service
Exactly.
that they expect.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Is there anything that we need to talk about that we haven't?
No, I don't
We've
think
covered
so.
it. Good
I
deal.
mean, I think a little bit of it is sometimes just managing people's expectations on what we're capable of actually doing.
Right,
Like I said, we don't have X-ray vision.
right.
So I kind of tell people it's almost like when you take your car to the mechanic and they kind of go through like their 48-point inspection or
Right.
whatever. It's kind of like, I mean, that's what we do, right? We go through and okay, I'm looking at a furnace. Okay, well, what do I need to look at? Okay, well, ducts, airflow, right? Are they insulated? What's the burn chamber look like? Do I have gas leaks? Do I have carbon monoxide leaks? How's the vent look? And then take into account safety, code, all that kind of good stuff. Okay, check this system is functioning as designed in a reasonably safe manner, in a reasonable and safe manner. And there's no material defects with it. Okay. And then we move on, okay, let's take a look at the electrical. So we want to take a look at all those systems the best that we can, but there certainly are, limitations to what we can see and what we can do. And, the fact that we're on site for, 4 hours.
Or, yeah.
I mean, I try to schedule myself a little bit more. I'd like to spend a little bit more time at properties than feeling like,
Rushed.
you're just kind of moving through. Want to spend a little bit more time, slow down, and try to do the best job that I can for my client, and just try to produce a good report. And I think at least from my standpoint, again, the fact that I work in a vacuum, I don't get the fact that, I mean, of all the reports that I produce on an annual basis, it's probably less than 5% of, even though I recommend that people call me, very rarely does anybody ever call me. So I think that shows the fact that the reports are understandable,
Yep.
Yeah, very
but
easy to
yet
concise.
detailed enough, right? That people feel like they're getting the information that they need.
Absolutely. That's good. That's what we appreciate about you for sure. So we always end our show with like, what is the one thing that you do every day, if you do, that sets yourself for success for that day? Like, if you miss it, your day is going to be a shit show or not.
Well, I think I do it more for my kids than I do it for myself, but I think it helps me as a byproduct is that, when they're getting their backpacks on and everybody's rushing out the door to catch the school bus, I look at them and tell them, hey, have a great day and do your best today. And by me telling them to do that, then a lot of times it kind of sets my focus too, where, I go through, because let's face it, I mean, there is a portion of the job that is repetitive,
Right.
right? I mean, I'm in houses every day, and every night I'm at my computer,
Doing reports.
writing reports. So each house is unique, but yet, a lot of it is the same, So I think by me telling them that, it also resets me to make sure that, that I'm fully focused on my day.
That's awesome. I like that. Very
So
good.
one more question for you. You
Yeah.
said New England, so are you a Patriots fan?
Yeah, at least for the time being.
Oh yeah, exactly. I'm sure.
No, when
They did get beat by the Texans.
when I grew up, they were awful. We used to have season tickets, and you would go to the games, and back in the late '70s, and there would just be people fighting in the stands and
Oh my gosh.
throwing stuff. I mean, it was. I'm kind of surprised looking back on it now that my dad thought that was an okay
A
place
good
to take me.
father-son bonding time.
But a little bit of a rougher crowd back then. But we stunk so bad for so long, and I remember, just growing up in New England. I mean, so and Red Sox, right? 84 years between titles. So my grandfather lived his entire life without seeing them.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so
yeah.
I kind of feel like now, like, okay, we've had our run and it's been a great 15, 20 years. And then we're just going to have like another century.
So you're just living it up right now.
Right. Like we're going to go back to complete mediocrity and, we'll be horrible. We'll be horrible again for an extended period of time. So better to have had and lost than to never had at all. So certainly, Brady will always go down as the golden child. We appreciate what he has done for the city for sure.
That's awesome.
Okay, so speaking of Brady, now I got a question. So I've heard that, and you're talking Tom Brady, right? Okay, so I read somewhere or something that he doesn't take pay increases. He's like the lowest paid quarterback because he wants them to be able to get better.
And this is one of those things that, people either love him or hate him. I think most people that
I
hate
don't
him,
like the crying.
most people that hate him, I think, just hate him because he wins. But to me, right? Yeah, I mean, he's always been the epitome of a team player. Like
So he really does do that. That's really
he's
awesome.
taking pay cuts. He's more interested in championships
As a
than he
team,
is
yeah.
how much money he makes.
Oscar says it's because he's married to a model and he doesn't need to care.
But well, I mean, you look at some of these other athletes that just they'll definitely move around for the highest bidder.
Yeah.
And Tom, I'm fully confident in the fact that he'll retire here, in a year or so, and he'll retire as a Patriot. And,
He deserves it.
and that'll be the end of a great career.
Well, that is really
I don't
cool
know,
then
your
that he does
backup's
that. I
pretty
didn't.
good too. Backup quarterback.
If it's not Nebraska football, I
Yeah.
don't know anything about it. So
Right.
I don't even know who
All
you're.
I know is we got problems this year. We got problems.
I think we do too as Broncos, right?
Oh, we won our new quarterback. Our Finn's
Oh.
awesome.
Who's
Right.
what's his name?
Oh, I forgot.
Oh, I thought you said it.
Locke. Yeah.
Locke.
I almost said Allen,
Okay.
but
I
it's
saw
Locke.
that the other
Yeah.
night. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's Mizzou, maybe Missouri.
Yep.
Okay.
So
He
I
played
recognize
awesome.
the name. Watched him a little bit.
And the
in
boys
college, I
like
think.
him.
Oh,
The rest
cool.
of the team like him. It's a good little fit. Watch it.
So,
All right.
Sweet. Well, thank you for coming.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we appreciate it very much. I know you're very busy, and we do appreciate you taking an hour to come down and do it.
My pleasure.
You tied it in with an inspection here, so that worked out.
Yep.
It did.
Yeah.
It did. Yep.
Nice.
Yep. Off to work.
Nice. All right. Well, have a great day, and Merry Christmas to you. If we
Yep.
don't see you before then.
Enjoy your holidays.
I will. Thanks. Merry Christmas to you guys.
Perfect.
Thank you.
We'd like to give a big shout out to E&L Signs for being our sponsor of this podcast. E&L Signs serves Western Colorado and Eastern Utah for all your screen printing and vehicle lettering needs. With over 30 years experience, Ed and Lori will get it done for you. So remember, E&L Signs.
If you like what you hear, please take time to review us on Apple Podcasts and make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. Also, if you'd like to be on the podcast, let us know, or if you have someone you would like us to feature, let us know that as well.
Thank you.